I'm Warren Fales. This video has to do with the environment, and this is all because of this global warming thing. We need to take a look at what the Bible tells us, and so that we understand about our environment. And here in the 8th chapter of the book of Genesis, now this is after the flood. Noah has built an altar, and he's expressing his thankfulness to God that he was spared through the flood. And God answers his worship here with this verse. God says, "While the earth remaineth, seed time and harvest," seed time that's spring, harvest that's fall, cold and heat, summer and winter, cold is winter, heat is summer, day and night shall not cease. I'll repeat that. While the earth remaineth, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. Now that is a declaration from the Creator God. Now the problem is, here in the United States of America, our education system has ruled out a Creator God. So people have been taught that we just evolved. Well, if we just evolved, then we could ignore God's promise here, and we could come up with all kinds of fantasy, fairy tales, and foolishness, and that's what global warming is. It's a trick of the devil to build distrust in our Creator and to cause we mortal beings to get all bent out of shape about protecting ourselves. Now, in back in the creation, go back to Genesis chapter 1. And God tells us exactly how He brought this world into existence. And in verses 6 and 7 and 8, He tells us about making air. God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters." And God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. And God called the firmament heaven, that's our atmosphere, and the evening and morning were the second day. Second day of creation, God made air. Now, air is composed of 5 parts of nitrogen to 1 part of oxygen. You squeeze that, compress that air, and it goes back to water as it was at the time of creation. And water is 2 parts of hydrogen, 1 part oxygen. Now then, God made, you read in Genesis there in the creation, God made vegetation. He made vegetation first, and then He made animals. Now, all breathing life requires oxygen. All plant life, all vegetation requires carbons, carbon dioxide and all the other carbons. So animal life and vegetation complement each other. We use the oxygen that plants produce, and plants use the carbons that we produce. So it balances out. Now then, this air, if it didn't move, it would become stagnant, and there would be places where there'd be too much oxygen and places where there'd be too many carbons, and it just wouldn't function. But God took care of all that because heat causes air to rise, spreads it out, it thins down. Heat thins it down, and so it rises. Cold coagulates it or condenses it. That's my word. And so it gets heavy. And so when the warm air rises, then the heavy air comes in to replace it. And that brings up circulation. We call that cyclonic movement. And so the atmosphere is in a cyclonic movement around the earth, so that it continues to blend. And with that in mind, you can understand how by God's design, it just keeps working just like he told Noah that it would. You see, the air gets polluted. We really, pollution is a global warming word. The air gets out of balance in different places, but this movement corrects the imbalance. And then God has a system of purifying the air. And this is the way he does it. He uses snow and sleet and ice and rain. And when the water in the atmosphere gets cold enough, it snows. And when the snow comes down, it brings with it all the say contaminants that are in the air, are collected by the snow, and they come down to the ground. I don't know if you've noticed it, but this spring when it started to thaw, they had scooped this snow off of my walk and piled it and just dumped it out on the grass on the lawn. Well, when the snow melted and the ground began to warm up, where that snow pile had been, the grass was a darker, deeper green, and it grew quicker and greened up faster than where there wasn't a pile of snow. Why? Well, because there was more nutrients in the pile of snow than there was in just the 2-3 inches of snow that had fallen. So that's a concrete example of how God makes this whole thing work. Plant life thrives on the carbons, and we thrive on the oxygen that plants produce and expel. They breathe in the carbons, they breathe out the oxygen. We breathe in the oxygen, we breathe out the carbons. And so we complement each other. Now, this global warming theory wants to scare all industrial nations into giving up our way of life. Now, why they do that, I don't know. But we need to realize here a few weeks back, there was a volcano erupting in Iceland. There was another one erupting in Chile, in South America. Now those two volcanoes spewed out more carbons in 1 hour than all the industries throughout the world would produce in a year, quite probably. That one in Iceland a year or so ago erupted, and it put so much carbons in the air that airlines were shut down going into England. Planes couldn't fly in or out of there. The ash in the polluted air would have destroyed their engines and they would have crashed somewhere. Besides, they probably couldn't see to take off or land. So this global warming is a hoax. If it were real, they'd have to figure out a way to put a cap on every volcano so that it couldn't erupt. Now that'd be a big undertaking. I don't know what kind of caps they could put on there that would hold when a volcano has so much pressure that it blows out. You see, when we drift away from God, we drift away from the source of truth, the source of wisdom. The Holy Spirit is a spirit of wisdom and a sound mind. And you grieve Him away, and that's what you do when you turn your back on God and you choose evolution as the origin of life. You're turning your back on God, and when you do, you choose to be an idiot. You reject the wisdom and the knowledge that only God can provide. King Solomon, when he was just a young boy to take over the throne of David, the one thing that he needed most of all was wisdom. As a young man, he was smarter than he was when he got older because he made a lot of mistakes. But God is the source of wisdom. Let's don't turn our back on God, because when we do, we choose to be ignorant. An ungodly person is a spiritual idiot. He has no concept of right and wrong. He couldn't care less. And so it's something to weigh heavily, consider seriously. But just remember, human life or animal life and vegetable life complement each other, and God uses them along with the circulation of the atmosphere to provide us with a safe environment in which to dwell. Thank you for your attention.